Fallout has always been a series defined by player agency. Nearly every aspect of the games gave the player freedom to approach situations in their own way. From the very beginning, you build a character to fit the role you want to play, and everything that follows, combat, dialogue, quests, all revolve around the choices the player makes. Combat was mechanically deep, rooted in character building, and designed to let you specialize. With the right stats, perks, and equipment, you could become a master of your chosen skill set. And yet, even at high levels, the game kept presenting challenges that demanded thought and adaptation. Dialogue offered more than just yes or no answers. It gave you the tools to roleplay and to shape your character's voice and personality. Were they honest, cruel, a sarcastic clown, a manipulative sociopath? The choices were there, often with optional lines that weren't required for progression, but revealed new details about NPCs and the world around them. Quests were layered, with multiple solutions. They weren't designed to funnel you into one or two pre-scripted outcomes, but to account for different playstyles. The consequences of your actions would be real, shown to you during the game and at the ending, which could differ greatly based on the choices you made. Player agency was accounted for in all of these systems. The earliest entries pushed player freedom to the extreme. Fallout 1 and 2 famously allowed you to kill nearly every NPC in the game if you wanted to. Sure, it probably wasn't the best way to experience the game, but the choice was yours. Fallout 1 even let a skilled, well-prepared character resolve the final boss encounter through dialogue alone, while still leaving combat options open for players who had built differently. Fallout 3 was the first game in the series with Bethesda at the helm, and it was a stumbling start. While it kept some of the series' atmosphere and translated the wasteland into 3D fairly well, there were major issues. The plot was narrow and inflexible, with little in the way of player choice to influence it. The game allowed little room for roleplay, forcing every player into the position of the same 19-year-old vault dweller. Many quests were reduced down to simplistic binary choices, A or B, and often only had one route to complete them. New Vegas proved that player agency on the level of Fallout 1 and 2 could still work.
What in the goddamn?
It gave players choices in every system, from character building to combat to quests. Fallout 4 should have been Bethesda's chance to learn from those lessons, to address Fallout 3's shortcomings, and to build on the example New Vegas set. Instead, Fallout 4 went in the opposite direction. It doubled down, as it stripped away mechanical depth, flattened its systems, and neutered player freedom. Fallout 4 takes the defining feature of the series, player agency, and throws it out the window. Character building is simplified to the point of irrelevance. Combat is boiled down to tedious shooter gameplay. Dialogue is often pointless, the options never carrying any effect. Quests are on rails with no options for differing outcomes or multiple solutions. Instead of letting you play your own way, Fallout 4 insists you follow the script it lays out. Illusion of choice is something you'll hear me say a lot throughout this video, as Fallout 4 seems to use it as a design philosophy. Everything in this game that is presented as a choice is hollow. It's a flimsy trick trying to con the player into thinking they're still playing a Fallout game. Another thing I'll often ask is, what is the point? Because as soon as the pointlessness of each choice is revealed, I wonder why I was even given the choice at all. Character building is a key part of the Fallout series, and is something that Fallout 4 has all but abandoned. Instead of giving players interesting and meaningful ways to grow their character and shape a unique playstyle, the system only offers broad, generic choices with little depth. This results in what is called the mono build, a character that feels the same no matter how you play it. In the mono build, specialization barely exists. Whether you pick pistols, rifles, plasma, lasers, melee, or heavy weapons, your character is just as effective with all of them. Non-combat skills, which once added depth to the gameplay and gave the player choice in how to roleplay their character, have been made nearly irrelevant or stripped out entirely. What used to be the three main pillars of character building and progression, special, perks, and skills, have been watered down or completely gutted. At the foundation of building a character across the series is the special system. These represent the fundamental attributes of the player character. In the earlier games, special shaped everything. They boosted your skills, influenced derived stats like carry weight, hit points, action points, or critical chance, and even opened up unique dialogue and interaction options. Because of how impactful they were, raising special was difficult. You either invested a rare perk point or paid for an expensive implant. It meant that when you committed to a stat, it actually mattered. Fallout 4 takes a very different approach. The player starts with 1 in every stat and 21 points to distribute, which might sound punishing at first until you realize special just isn't that special anymore. With skills removed from the game, special no longer governs them. Many derived stats, like crit chance or skill rate, have been cut entirely, while the few that remain, things like damage resistance, are disconnected from special. Most stats now only influence 1 or 2 minor attributes, and that's it. Strength, it now governs exactly 2 things, carry weight and melee damage. Perception, all it does is nudge your accuracy up in VATs. Endurance, it slightly bumps up your health per level and tweaks how fast sprinting drains your action points. Charisma, it unlocks the only real skill checks left in the game, persuasion and dialogue. It also gives you slightly better barter prices, because apparently that's all your charm is good for. Intelligence, it doesn't make you clever, it doesn't change dialogue, it doesn't open up new approaches, it just gives you more XP, that's all. Agility, a bigger action point pool and easier sneaking. And finally, luck. Now it just improves the recharge rate for the shiny new critical hit button. Special has been reduced to a glorified perk gate. Every level, you can dump a perk point into any stat you want, and the game clearly expects you to do this, since Special's only real purpose is to unlock perk trees. What used to define your character has been reduced to a menu system. The actual impact of your stats is negligible. Playing with 1 in a special stat feels nearly identical to playing with 10. Want to do a low intelligence run? Too bad. A character with 1 intelligence is just as articulate and insightful as one with 10. Special doesn't define your character anymore. It barely affects the game at all.
Look at that. Maybe them bullets done your brain some good.
Neat. Cool. Hopefully this kind of design doesn't become a running theme. Perks, like Special, were divvied out in limited amounts in past games. The reason for this was simple. Perks used to be powerful. They could shape and change entire builds. In the past games, perks let the player specialize their character and hone in on how they wanted that character to play and shape up. Fallout 4 gives the player a perk every level, which, considering how skills have been axed from the game, you would hope that perks would have been given more power to make up for the loss of other ways to build your character. You would be wrong. The majority of perks can be summed up as generic, broad, or both. An attempt has been made to kind of roll skills into perks, and some skills have just been turned into a perk or 2. The old weapon skills have been boiled down into 7 flat damage up perks. For example, rank 1 of Gunslinger gives you 20% more damage with pistols. That's it, no nuance, no character flavor. Worse still is that Fallout 4 doesn't even distinguish between weapon types. The same perk applies whether you're firing a 10mm pistol, a plasma pistol, or a laser pistol. To the game, they're all just pistols. The result is a system that makes the different weapons feel like reskins of the same damage number instead of unique tools to use in combat. Sure, higher ranks throw in a couple of extras, like Gunslinger rank 2 increasing pistol range, but in practice, the damage boost completely overshadows the minor bonuses. This system encourages you to grab the generic percent damage perks, as there is really no other way to make your weapons more effective. Now compare this to how New Vegas let players specialize through perks. The best example of this is the Cowboy perk. Available starting at level 8, with a guns and melee skill of 45, the Cowboy perk gives the player 25% increased damage when using revolvers, lever action weapons, dynamite, knives, and hatchets. I love this perk. It gives the player a way to roleplay New Vegas' Wild West aesthetic while providing an effective way to engage with the combat. The weapons covered by the Cowboy perk can be strong, but they have built-in trade-offs like low ammo capacity and slow reloads. This perk gives you power, but also asks you to commit to a playstyle. This is not the only example of this type of perk in New Vegas. Perks like Pyromaniac, Laser Commander, and Shotgun Surgeon all give similar freedom to the player to make meaningful choices in the weapons they use through the perks they take. This sort of meaningful choice in weapon perks is totally absent in Fallout 4. Because all of the weapon perks are so broad, for the first 15 hours of my playthrough, I used whatever garbage I picked up or had ammo for. Crappy pipe guns stripped off of raiders, the starter 10mm pistol from Vault 111, the laser rifle you get from Dance. It didn't matter, they all felt the same. My character was somehow just as deadly with a rusty pipe gun welded together by some wasteland hobo as with an advanced Brotherhood issue laser rifle. And that's insane. Running out of ammo and having to use a different gun didn't really matter. The perk that boosts a pipe gun is the same perk that boosts a laser rifle, so why should I care which one I'm using? In earlier games, picking up a weapon outside your specialization was a gamble, sometimes even a punishment. You'd miss more, you'd waste ammo, you'd be less effective. That was the point. It reinforced your build. It reinforced your choices as a player. In this RPG series, shocking, I know. Well, since skills are dead and perks are watered down so heavily, the choice of weapons you use doesn't even matter. You can't specialize. You can't commit. You could fight through the wasteland with a pipe gun glued together from scrap metal, or with a plasma pistol that shoots hot balls of superheated death, and the game just shrugs and says, yeah, same thing, whatever. Where's the reward for specialization? Where's the consequence? What is the point? Outside of weapon damage perks, most of Fallout 4's perk chart can be broken down into 3 categories. Old skills turned into perks, revamped versions of perks from the past games, or crafting perks. And at first glance, Fallout 4 looks like it's offering you a buffet of options. The perk chart is huge and colorful, and you might even think, oh wow, look at all these perks, surely these will change how I play, and that after a dozen or so levels, you will have something resembling a character build. But again, you'd be wrong. Because the gameplay is so mechanically brain dead, most perks just don't matter. Sure, they might on paper give you some neat tricks, but they just pad out the same tired combat loop. Take the agility tree. I could grab Sneak, Mr. Sandman, and Ninja and build myself into a stealth sniper. Neat, right? Except all that really means is I get to one-shot enemies that were already laughably easy to kill. The result? Dungeons take longer to complete because I'm crouching around like an idiot instead of just clearing rooms the same way I always do. Even if I screw up, get detected, and the whole building dogpiles me, it doesn't matter. I can just whip out whatever gun I got and mow them all down like nothing happened. Another issue is that the vast majority of Fallout 4's perks are combat focused. The few that even try to dip their toes outside of combat are often stripped down versions of what they used to be. Take the Lady Killer and Black Widow perks, for example. In the past games, they were double-purpose perks, giving both combat and non-combat use. They gave you unique dialogue choices with NPCs of the opposite sex of your character, while boosting your damage against them. In Fallout 4, since the new dialogue system has been ground into dust, we'll get there, these perks have been reduced down to deal more damage to the opposite sex, and slightly better odds at persuasion. No special dialogue, no interesting flavor, just another boring damage buff. The dialogue part is tacked on like an afterthought because that's all it is. It's astounding how effectively Fallout 4 has made perks boring. These things used to be interesting. They used to be powerful. They were often a key part in making a character build. Now they are mostly percentage damage up buffs and seemingly little else. They're so bland. I'm not going to pretend that all the perks in previous titles were amazing or even useful. The older games had their fair share of simple damage up perks, but they also had ways of making them more interesting, like the previously mentioned Cowboy perk, or by adding perks that had uses outside of combat, like Lady Killer and Black Widow. Again, just look at New Vegas. Perks like Paralyzing Palm, Jury Rigging, Terrifying Presence, Friend of the Night. They weren't just all numbers. They changed how you interacted with the world, or gave you new tools to roleplay your character. Fallout 4 doesn't have anything like that. It just hands you another damage buff and calls it a day. With how much special has been gutted, reduced to little more than a lock and key system for perks, and skills ripped out entirely, perks are forced to carry the entire weight of character building, and they just can't. They are so broad and combat focused that I just can't give a shit about them. They do so little to change how the game plays, that at multiple times throughout my playthrough, I would have several perk points just sitting there waiting to be used. These are the only things you get for a level up in this game, and I could go for hours just ignoring them and my game played exactly the same. I never felt like I was lagging behind, or getting to encounters that I needed perks to beat. Eventually I'd dump a point into Heavy Gunner or Rifleman and nothing. I pulled the trigger, the enemy fell over, just like the last 100 times. Sure, the game told me I was doing 20% more damage, but hell if I could tell. Getting a perk used to be exciting. It used to matter. In Fallout 4, I just don't care. What is the point of a perk when it feels like it doesn't change a damn thing? God, I sure hope skills are still useful. Oh, wait. Skills. Oh, skills. It's a very interesting choice to remove an entire central game mechanic and not replace it with anything. kinda like tearing down a support pillar in a house and just hoping the roof doesn't cave in. They were one of the main parts of Fallout's character building, and the devs, in their infinite wisdom, decided to just get rid of them. Entirely. Okay, sure, why not? Skills were those magical little numbers you got to nudge upward every level. They would improve your character's expertise in various abilities. Medicine, science, repair, barter, each one gave you tangible improvements. A few points in guns made you deadlier. A few points in medicine made every stim pack stretch further. And perks tied to skills gave you real incentives to specialize, rewarding your investment with powerful abilities that reflected the kind of character you wanted to play. They balanced out a character. The master of small guns wasn't great with a minigun or a plasma caster. The wasteland doctor probably shouldn't be trying to fix a car, and this was only half of what these lovely little stats could do. Apart from making numbers go up, skills had uses and interactions in the world outside of combat through these little things called skill checks. If you've played RPGs before, you probably have seen skill checks in a lot of games. The game takes one of your stats, compares it against the difficulty, and decides whether your character succeeds or fails at an action. Fallout used to be lousy with them. Most relied on skills, sometimes special, and they were everywhere. Want someone to let you into their secret base? That's a speech check. See if you're persuasive enough. Need to power up a broken elevator? That's a repair check. Prove you got the technical know-how. They opened up alternate ways to approach quests and encounters based on the kind of character you built. Maybe you could talk your way through a problem, sneak past it, hack into it, or just brute force it. I'll talk about the lack of skill checks and choice in quests when we get to them. But for now, let's finish burying skills, since the devs have already lined them up, shot them in the back of the head, and left the corpse in a ditch. Skills gave this sense of player agency that is now totally absent in Fallout 4. With skills gone, how can they be checked? Well, the answer is obviously that they can't, and so there are barely any in the game. As mentioned, the only stat that consistently gets checked is Charisma, which basically stands in for the old speech skill. But even then, these checks are shallow. Most of the time, they get you a few more caps as a quest reward, or maybe let you skip a fight or a fetch quest. They almost never change the outcome of a quest because those outcomes are basically the same no matter what you do. Another source of player agency cut from the game. And again, I'm left asking, what is the point? Why strip so much of the guts out of the system and then replace it with scraps? The tiny remnants of skill checks that do exist are meaningless, vestigial reminders of what used to be a core mechanic. Fallout 4 leaves you with almost no way to engage with its world outside of pulling a trigger. And the worst part is, the combat is an awful, miserable slog. Fallout 4's combat is an awful, miserable slog. Going into this video, I honestly wasn't sure how much time I'd even spend on it. My memory of the combat was that it was fine, serviceable, nothing great, nothing terrible, just there. It worked, and that was about it. I thought that it wasn't worth going into much. Boy, did that opinion change quick. By the second dungeon, I was already sick of it, because when you've slogged through one fight in Fallout 4, you've basically slogged through them all. Part of the reason why combat is such a slog is the previously mentioned lack of any meaningful choice in how you engage with it. There are no skills tied to weapon types, and the perks are so broad they might as well just read "make gun shoot better." Just choose whichever one you like the look of more or whichever has ammo. Most of them are just skins shooting different colored hit scan projectiles. On the player's end, this means that combat is reduced to just pressing mouse 1 until all the bad man's health bars go to 0. No thought, no tactics, no sense that one approach might be better than the other. Every weapon feels just as effective as all the others. Once I got a bit into my playthrough, I decided I'd try to specialize, picking heavy weapons over the random crap approach I'd been using for the first 10-ish hours. But it didn't matter. Whether I was using the flamer, the minigun, or the missile launcher, every encounter played out the same way. I once again come back to asking, why have an arsenal of different weapons when they all feel the same? Why give me a choice that is so meaningless? What is the point? Alright, so weapon choice is pointless. Got it. Let's move on to armor. Fallout 4 has kind of a simplified version of Morrowind's layered armor system. You've got a few underlayers like vault suits, and then you can slap armor pieces over your arms, legs, chest, and head. Each piece bumps up your damage resistance, energy resistance, and sometimes radiation resistance. You'll find all the old classics, leather, metal, combat armor in one form or another. It looks like you have options. In practice, there's only one right answer: power armor. Any kind of power armor. Power armor in this game is a no-brainer. A full set of the worst power armor in the game, Raider power armor, which looks like it was made out of a bunch of scraps welded together by a raider tripping on jet, gives the player 500 damage resistance, 250 energy resistance, and over 1,000 radiation resistance. Compare that to a full set of heavy combat armor, mid-tier gear, which tops out at barely over 100 in damage and energy resistance. Even hopping into an empty power armor frame with no pieces attached still gives the player 60 damage and energy resistance, while also negating fall damage and increasing your carry capacity. Now, power armor being top tier isn't new to Fallout. It's always been the best protection around. But in the older games, there were actually balancing factors. Power armor was rare. It was late game gear. You usually had to complete dangerous quests or get special training before you could even use it. In Fallout 1, it required getting to the Brotherhood of Steel and completing a dangerous quest in the radioactive glow. Fallout 3 and New Vegas forced you to get training before you could even wear it. Fallout 4? It hands you a half-decent suit within the first hour. The very first quest practically shoves you inside one, minigun included, with stats that blow away everything else you'll find for the next 10 hours. And if that weren't bad enough, power armor isn't even rare. It's everywhere, scattered in dozens of locations across the Commonwealth, often just sitting behind a locker terminal. Not only is it the best armor in the game, the devs practically gift wrap it for you and then litter the wasteland with spares. Ah, I can hear you shouting, but fusion cores, repairs! Yeah, well, who cares? Fusion cores are supposed to be the limiting factor, except they're scattered across dungeons, dropped by enemies, sold by vendors. You'll never run out of the bastards unless you sell them like an idiot. And repairs? Sure, power armor is the only gear in the game that needs fixing, but since the Commonwealth is practically a wasteland Home Depot, patching your armor is trivial. Find a bit of duct tape and some other random crap and boom, you're good as new. So let's recap. Power armor gives you overwhelming defense, the game throws one at you in the tutorial, it's scattered everywhere across the map, fusion cores are common, and the repairs are basically free. Fallout 4 doesn't just encourage you to use power armor, it's practically screaming, "Use this, you fucking moron!" Now, you might be saying, what about legendary armor? It has good effects. So let's talk about legendary equipment. This'll be quick. Legendary gear comes with special effects slapped on. Things like 50% increased limb damage, or take 15% less damage from ghouls. You'll find these either in dungeon chests, as quest rewards, or looted off so-called legendary enemies. More on them later. If you think that this might spice up combat, you'd be wrong. In practice, it's useless. Why would I care about doing more limb damage when enemies are already so easy to kill? Why would I need 15% less damage from certain enemies when I'm already sealed head to toe inside power armor that makes me practically invincible? The other problem is the randomness of the drops. Fallout 4's legendary loot system shits out gear like a cursed slot machine, with no regard for usefulness. You'll find junk effects stapled to weapons you might actually want, and good effects wasted on garbage tier items. Ghoul Slayer's Gamma Gun. Great, more radiation damage against enemies immune to radiation. Kneecapper Fat Man? Yes, that small yield nuclear bomb needed bonus leg damage. Yeah, I just don't get it. The legendary system is not interesting or rewarding. Most drops end up as vendor trash. After a while, I stopped even picking them up because why bother? All they did was take up space. Sure, there are a handful of preset legendaries that you can find through quests that are fine, maybe even decent, but they still don't change how most of the combat ever shakes out. Now let's talk about the things you actually shoot at in this game. Fallout 4's enemy design is abysmal. Practically every enemy in this game falls into one of two categories: fodder or bullet sponge. Fodder enemies are paper thin. They go down in a few hits from pretty much any weapon and rarely pose any threat. They've got trash weapons and exist solely to pad out fights, making up the bulk of most combat encounters. The game slaps on a generic name like Raider, Super Mutant, or Gunner, but it doesn't matter, they're all the same walking speed bump. The fodder enemies are bodies thrown in to just make encounters look bigger. Since they do so little damage and have so little health, they're the combat equivalent of fighting a toddler. What you end up spending most of your ammo on in a Fallout 4 fight are the bullet sponges. Usually having one or two in each group of enemies, the bullet sponges have different names than the fodder. Names like Raider Meth Head or Super Mutant Ball Bag. This is supposed to imply that these guys are higher on the food chain, and therefore a bigger threat. What that actually means for gameplay is that these guys have more health. And I mean it, like a shit ton of health. While your average fodder enemy goes limp in less than a handful of rounds, a bullet sponge will take 3 or 4 times the amount to go down regardless of level. It seems like giving enemies more health is the devs' way of making an enemy more difficult, as outside of the extra HP, the bullet sponges are the exact same to fight. They don't have better AI, they don't use different tactics, and are often using the same weapons as fodder. Fighting fodder is like kicking toddlers, but fighting bullet sponges is like sawing through a log with a butter knife. It isn't harder or more challenging, it just takes longer and makes every encounter drag on and on. There is a subtype of the bullet sponge, the legendary enemy. There's a random chance that any given enemy spawns as one, with legendary slapped in front of their name like that suddenly means something. Kill them and you'll be rewarded with an almost certainly useless legendary item. So what makes them special? Better AI? Unique abilities? Actual tactics? Oh no, you silly goose, they just hit harder and soak more bullets. Oh, also, if you don't manage to kill them and they survive a shot with less than 50% health remaining, they will mutate. The game blasts a shitty sound effect, the enemy will start to glow for some reason, and then their entire health bar refills. Congratulations, you now get to kill the same boring enemy twice. Do they gain new powers after they mutate? No. Do they suddenly fight smarter? No. They just stand there while you dump more ammo into them. That's the big mechanic. Why is this in the game? Did the devs think that this makes combat more interesting? Legendary enemies do nothing to make the combat more interesting. They just waste more of your time and ammo. The way Fallout 4 handles enemy scaling completely robs the game of any sense of progression. From the very beginning, you're fighting fodder and sponges, and 25 levels later, you're still fighting fodder and sponges. Weapons might spit out bigger damage numbers, perks might inflate them even more, but enemies just bloat to match. Combat never evolves, your character never feels stronger. In the older games, character combat progression was tangible. In Fallout 2, your power-armored Chosen One could stroll back into Klamath and stomp geckos that once gave you hell. In New Vegas, your high-level courier could wipe out the powder gangers at the NCR Correctional Facility without breaking a sweat. Fallout 4 denies you that completely. No matter how high you level, the game just feeds you bigger sponges to chew through, endless meat for the grinder, and the game expects you to do a lot of shooting. In fact, the main way Fallout 4 expects you to engage with its world is out of the barrel of a gun. Nearly every quest funnels you into some dungeon where you're forced to mow down hordes of brain-dead enemies just to tick a box. It's like the devs were terrified that if you went 5 minutes without a shootout, you'd get bored and turn the game off. The irony is that combat is so dull, I basically went on autopilot during combat sections, pressing the mouse button until the bad guys fell over while talking about anything else but the game. Did you know that World of Warcraft will add their sex update to the game in the next patch? The combat system is nowhere near deep enough to carry this much of the game, but it has to because the devs stripped out or simplified every other meaningful system the series used to have. So combat isn't just a part of Fallout 4, it is Fallout 4. And that's a disaster because the combat sucks. Guns are cosmetic reskins, power armor is the only good choice. Perks are empty number fluff, enemies are either scaling health walls or pathetic ankle biters, and progression just doesn't exist. Nothing you do as the player matters, and yet this is the system the game wants you to spend the bulk of the playtime on. What is the point? To close out on combat and character building, it feels like the devs never wanted the players to worry about combat or how to build their character for it. Pick whatever perks, doesn't matter. Grab whatever gun, they all play the same. Here, have a free set of power armor. The combat never evolves, the enemies behave the same way from start to finish, and your character never really grows. You're just as deadly in hour 1 as you are in hour 30. Fighting a Deathclaw right after leaving the vault. Every system around combat has been stripped down or simplified until they barely matter. There's no pressure to shape a build, spend perk points wisely, or play to your strengths, because it makes no difference. Your character is the ultimate jack of all trades, good with every weapon, effective in every fight. The dev's attitude feels like, you're just here to shoot things, right? Don't worry about stats or builds, just have fun shooting the bad guys. Look, raiders, see? It's a Fallout game, right? Before diving into dialogue and quests, I want to talk about the player character. In the older Fallout games, protagonists were partial blank slates. They all had some backstory to anchor them into the world, but left plenty of space for players to fill in the rest. In Fallout 1, the Vault Dweller can be a guy or a gal, 16 or 65, a moron or a genius. Fallout 2's Chosen One followed the same model. Yes, they came from Arroyo and were marked as the Village Chosen, but who they were beyond that was entirely up to you. New Vegas arguably offered the most freedom. The courier's only fixed detail was their job, someone delivering packages for the Mojave Express. Everything else, their history, personality, even their motivations, were something for the player to fill in. Fallout 4 tosses this away in favor of giving the player a full backstory that removes much of the player's ability to roleplay or imagine their own character. Fallout 4's sole survivor is probably the most set-in-stone protagonist in the series' history. Both the male and female sole survivor are locked into preset careers, are most likely in their late 20s to early 30s, and are presented to be well-adjusted members of pre-war America. Right from the get-go, the player is pigeonholed in how they can play these protagonists. Want to play a grizzled senior citizen? Well, you can't. Nate, the male survivor, is a recent combat veteran, and Nora, the female survivor, is a new mother, both of which pretty much rule out them being gray-haired pensioners. Want to play someone who is a delinquent or criminal? Well, again, tough shit. Both of the survivors are functioning members of pre-war society. Nate practicing a speech for his local veterans hall suggests he was given an honorable discharge, and Nora is a practicing lawyer of some kind, judging by the Juris Doctor on the shelf of the family home. None of these scream societal outcast. Now, having a preset backstory isn't automatically a bad thing. If the game meaningfully engages with it, if Nate's military history or Nora's legal background actually shape dialogue options, quest lines, or the overall narrative, then it could work. So of course the game does nothing with it. The game locks the player in the box of preset decisions about the player character, and then just forgets about it. It's bizarre. It's especially bizarre how this setup undermines the female survivor, Nora. At least Nate's military background provides an excuse for why he can thaw out a Vault 111 and immediately start gunning down raiders. It even half explains how he can strap into a suit of power armor and go toe-to-toe with a Deathclaw. But Nora? The poor woman is a lawyer. How the hell is a lawyer keeping pace with raiders, wielding a minigun, and stomping through firefights in power armor? None of it makes sense. Why give them different backstories without thinking this through? This is stuff that happens in the first hour of the game, and the baffling part is how easy it would have been to fix. Just make Nora military too. If the devs wanted them to still be slightly different, they had options. Make her a pilot, or a technician, or a medic, or a communications officer, or an armorer. Anything to explain how she can be a wasteland commando. Hell, make her National Guard, CIA, FBI, or even just a regular Boston cop. Any of these would have given some shred of credulity to her being as combat effective as her veteran husband. To make it even worse, Nate is the one that narrates the game's opening cutscene. He talks about his ancestor fighting in World War II, considers his own time in the army, and confesses his fear that another war is coming as he thinks about Nora and their son. The whole thing feels like the devs wanted Nate to be the real protagonist, like the canon choice was always meant to be the father searching for his son, trying to mirror Fallout 3's story. It wouldn't surprise me if early in development Nate was the only option before someone remembered that Fallout is supposed to be an RPG and, oh right, players might want to make their own character. Another explanation is that the devs just didn't consider the consequences of it at all. They didn't see how setting all this background for Nate hurts Nora's version of the story, and makes her seem like an afterthought. All that narration, all that setup about lineage and duty, frames one protagonist as the correct choice, only for the game to not do anything with it. They wrote all this fluff that they barely touch, and that ends up damaging the experience for the player that picks the wrong option. I don't understand why the devs would set this up and then do nothing with it. It's one of the rare cases where they actually add something instead of carving out yet another system and leaving a bleeding wound where game mechanics used to be. The sole survivor's background has zero impact on the game. Nothing. And the frustrating part is how easy it would have been to use it. This could have been an origin system, letting the player pick from a dozen possible careers that shape who their survivor is in the wasteland. Tie them to unique dialogue, small bonuses, maybe even a perk or two. A pre-war doctor could have unique options in quests where someone is sick or injured. A lawyer could pull out courtroom tricks or slick lawyer talk in conversations. This kind of shit practically writes itself. It could have been a neat replacement for the trait system, which is also absent from this game, as if you could somehow get even less gameplay mechanics. And I want to stress, I'm not pretending to be some sort of game design savant here. These ideas aren't groundbreaking. They're the kind of fixes anyone could come up with in a few minutes of thought. When we get to quests, I'm going to throw out plenty of suggestions like this. Not because I think I'm clever, but because the missed opportunities in this game are that obvious. And they would have done wonders in making this game feel like an actual Fallout game. They would have given some life to the idea of player agency. And it's nuts that the devs did none of that and chose to make the game as shallow as it is. To end this section off, I guess I should cover the voice protagonist a bit. It's a bad decision. Fallout 4 has already killed off so many ways to roleplay, and the voice Protag is just another twist of the knife. Suddenly, you can't even decide what your character sounds like. If you enjoy making yourself in the game, shaping the player character to look like you, choosing dialogue as if you were the one speaking, that illusion is broken the second someone else's voice comes out of your mouth. You're stuck with the voice the devs picked for you. It's another odd choice, as it really doesn't do much for the story or player character. The performance is well done enough for the most part, I just fail to see why it was needed. I think that this feels like yet another step towards turning the sole survivor into a fixed protagonist instead of a role-playing blank slate. They already gave you a preset backstory, a preset family, even preset names, and now you're given a preset voice. It's not your character anymore, it's their character. None of the dialogue is made particularly stronger by voice acting either. In fact, hearing the awful lines spoken out loud makes them so much worse. Bland or awkward writing is far easier to ignore when you read it in your head. Hearing those same lines spoken out loud just amplifies how bad they are. This is especially true for the joke lines. Oh god, sarcastic option. Everyone hold on to your butts.
Oh, come on, Eddie, it's me, your old pal Molly McFuck-yourself.
Is the dev's definition of humor just being cringe or awkward? Which leads us to yet another system that has been sacrificed on the altar of simplification: dialogue and conversations. Conversations in Fallout 4 are shadows of what they once were. What was once a system used to give the player options in how they engaged with NPCs has been flattened into 4-button exchanges that almost never matter. Conversations used to be rich in choices. In older Fallouts, the average conversation with even an insignificant NPC would have several options for the player to choose. Often these options allowed for a player to roleplay their character's personality, progress down a quest differently, attempt skill checks, or just learn more about the characters in the world. In Fallout 4, conversations are railroads. It doesn't matter what track you choose, it all ends up at the same station. Illusion of choice seemed to be a priority for the devs when making Fallout 4's dialogue, as many of the dialogue options do nothing to affect the follow-up line. Not to mention how limited the so-called choices are, with every exchange artificially limited to 4 canned responses. Fallout 4? More like Fallout 4 options for every dialogue. It's the most obvious downgrade to the dialogue system, and probably the most damaging. With only 4 slots to work with, nuance and conversation is dead. So many times I wanted to ask a reasonable follow-up, or press harder on a point, but the game just wouldn't let me. All your player agency, your choice in conversation, smothered by the 4-button dialogue wheel. Take the first conversation you have with Father in the Institute. This is a huge moment. You finally found your son, who also happens to lead the shadowy faction that kidnaps Wastelanders and replaces them with synths. These guys are the boogeymen of the Commonwealth. I had a mountain of questions. Above all, why are you replacing people? What is the purpose? The game gives you exactly one option to ask about the Institute. Pick it, and Father will blandly explain that he's in charge. Oh, okay. Cool, I guess. So after that, the only follow-up even close to what I want to ask is pointing out that the people of the Commonwealth are scared of the Institute. His answer? That people are always afraid of what they don't understand, and ultimately the Commonwealth has nothing to fear from them. Excuse me? Motherfucker, your organization has been replacing people with robots. You sabotaged the Commonwealth's attempt to set up a government. Your synths can be found murdering people across the wasteland. They have plenty to be afraid of. All he can say is just give him time and he'll help me understand. Oh, for God's sake, help me understand now. Just let me ask the obvious questions. Why the hell can't the game just give me more options right now? It's an artificial limitation, and it drives me crazy. I'm talking to one of the most important NPCs in this game, and I can't ask him anything about what he and his organization are doing. At best, I can nod my head and then just get a tour of the place, get to go and admire the synthetic gorillas they've made for whatever stupid reason. Brilliant. Compare this to the conversations you would have with NPCs from Fallout's past. At the end of Fallout 1, the player can ask the Master to explain what his plans are and why exactly he is turning people into super mutants. In Fallout New Vegas, Mr. House and Caesar have tons of optional dialogue choices that can have them explaining more about their plans and ideology. You can really delve into these characters and get more about the story and the world out of them. You can come away with a clear understanding of their motives and the philosophy driving them. This is because those games didn't strangle themselves with some arbitrary 4 choices only rule. There was room to breathe, space for depth. Fallout 4, on the other hand, can't even give you the chance to ask one of its most important NPCs what his actual plans are. Instead, you're left with 4 neutered buttons that lead nowhere. Why? What is the point of making the amount of dialogue choices so narrow? All it does is follow the pattern of this game doing seemingly everything in its power to damage player agency. Another problem with the dialogue wheel is ambiguity. The choices shown aren't your full lines of dialogue, just vague shorthand, sometimes a single word, that only sort of hints at what you're actually going to say. Too often the response you pick doesn't line up with the words that come out of your character's mouth. For example, one conversation in the Brotherhood questline has you talking to Proctor Ingram and Dr. Lee about Liberty Prime's weapons. Lee will state that without his nukes, Prime won't be able to take on the Institute. 2 of the options to respond are agree or disagree. If you choose agree, you reply with,
"She's right."
Okay, that's pretty close, I guess, if not a little pointless, as Ingram just says,
"Of course she's right."
If you pick disagree, you get,
"Maybe we can arm him with something else."
I don't know what the devs think the word disagree means, but that sentence is a bit of a stretch to fit that choice. You aren't disagreeing with her there, more like offering alternative ideas? A more appropriate disagree answer would be something like, no, I think he can manage without them. And as an aside, it's funny how you have to get Prime his nukes so he has enough firepower for the Institute when he uses his eye laser to actually get you into the Institute proper and not his nukes. Like, did the devs not realize that when making the quest? Did nobody double check? Anyway, responses like this are littered throughout the game, where you say something that is at best distantly related to the 1 or 2 word response you chose. The worst offender is the common sarcastic option. It's rarely actually sarcasm, and just seems to be the dedicated, humorous answer button. It appears at least once in nearly every conversation, and you can never predict what kind of idiotic line your character will spit out, only that it will be painfully unfunny.
"Doctor, it's time for you to reverse death itself."
What?
Technically, the corpse was defiled already. Could you say that like Dr. Frankenstein?
Igor, fetch me the brain!
No, I will not.
The so-called sarcasm isn't witty, it isn't clever, it's deranged. The lines are so bizarre and out of nowhere that your character ends up sounding like a lunatic rather than a smartass. So I ended up picking them anyways, just to keep up with my daily dose of cringe and to plumb the depths of what the writers considered to be humor.
Hi.
Are you here for the synth?
I'm here to pick up an order. 2 large pepperoni and a calzone. Name is Fuck You.
What's actually funny is that this problem of line ambiguity is one of the devs' own creation. The earlier Fallout games never had this issue, because they just showed you the full line of dialogue. Yes, actual sentences. Imagine that, reading more than 2 words before deciding what your character says. It was clear, and it worked. So why break it? Why strip clarity out of a system that didn't need fixing? The only reason I can come up with is that they wanted to mask how little the choices actually mattered. Another thing that makes the dialogue a joke is how often the choices are just the same line repeated in different ways. In the quest Diamond City Blues, you can invite an NPC to join you in ambushing a chem deal. They say yes, and then the game presents you with 4 different follow-up options, all of which basically boil down to, let's go.
Good. I could use some backup for this. The meet is near the Backstreet Apparel building.
I know where that is. Let's go.
I just hope you don't screw this up. The meet is near the Backstreet Apparel building. Let's go.
Don't worry. This isn't my first rodeo.
Note says the meet is near the Backstreet Apparel building. You know where that is?
Oh yeah, down along the river. Come on, let's do this.
The meet is near the Backstreet Apparel building.
Right, down along the river. Let's do this.
This is the problem with forcing the 4 option wheel on every single conversation. Sometimes there just aren't 4 different distinct things to say, but instead of admitting that, the devs padded out with 3 or 4 nearly identical responses that change nothing. It's filler. It's like they designed the system backwards. Every dialogue must have 4 buttons, even if one would have worked perfectly fine. Genius. The veneer of choice in Fallout 4's conversations is paper thin, and the game doesn't even try very hard to hide it. Most of the time, it doesn't matter which option you pick. The NPC will nudge you back onto the one track they were already heading down. Conversations are a one-way road in this game. You always come out with the answer the game wants. The way the game disguises this is almost insulting. I call it the buffer line. Say you pick the sarcastic option. What happens? The NPC barely acknowledges it. They toss out a limp, "Oh, how cute," or "how funny," before immediately snapping back into the main script. This can be seen with all 4 options in dialogue. Here's a crappy flowchart I made to show what I mean. An NPC asks you to kill some raiders. You choose agree, and they say, "Thanks, I knew I could count on you." You pick disagree, they sigh, then say, "Anyway, I need you to do it." You pick sarcastic, they chuckle, and then say, "Very funny, I need you to do it." You pick the question option, they give you one bland sentence of extra info like, "The raiders are mean." And then after all this crap, you still get the same line of, "Okay, the raiders are here." Congratulations, all 4 roads led to the same exact quest marker. Each reply feels like the game brushing off your answers just to move on to the line it wants to spit in your face. Like you're pestering it with your silly attempts at roleplay when all it wants you to do is hit accept quest so it can funnel you back into the shooting gallery. Your choice didn't matter and had no impact on the conversation, so why bother even asking? Like 90% of Fallout 4's dialogue follows this chart. The game will also straight up just ignore whatever you pick if it feels like it. Early in the game, I returned to Preston Garvey after doing the first settlement quest. He starts into his "I never told you how I became the last Minuteman" speech. One of your choices is not interested. Perfect, let's shut this down right here. My character says straight to his face,
I'm not interested in your life story.
a pretty definitive no. And what does old Preston Gravy do here? He brushes it off and goes,
"Just hear me out. This is important."
He then plows ahead and asks if I've heard of the Quincy Massacre. In other words, the game doesn't give a shit what I picked. It already decided I was sitting through Preston's lore vomit whether I liked it or not. There isn't even a way to double down and shut him up, as every follow-up option just leads you into the next chunk of exposition. If the devs really wanted me to hear about the Quincy Massacre no matter what, then why even bother with the fake not interested option? Just have Preston deliver his speech automatically. At least then it's honest about the fact that I don't actually get a say. Another perfect example. Later in the game, I was in the Dugout Inn in Diamond City. An NPC named Edward corners me and starts a conversation I never asked for. Fine, whatever. I immediately pick, "Leave me alone." Clear enough, right? Nope. Edward just shrugs it off and says he was about to offer me a well-paying job. Still not giving a shit, I pick "Not interested." Now that should be the end of it. But Edward doesn't care. He still tells me that if I change my mind, I should head to the Cabot house and ask for him. Then, without wanting it, a brand new quest pops up on my screen and the game even slaps a quest marker on it. I told this guy to fuck off twice, and the game rewarded my refusals by giving me the quest anyway. Fallout 4 didn't even pretend my answers mattered. It just steamrolled over them. And that's the part that pisses me off. Why even put "leave me alone" or "not interested" if they don't actually do anything? I know the devs hate player agency and just want to shove shit in the player's face. So just do it. Cut the pretense. Have Edward walk up, shove the quest into my log, and be done with it. You'd want me to have the quest. You can't seem to imagine a world where I don't want the quest. So just give me the quest, devs. It would be better than suffering through all these fake choices. This game is stuffed with dialogue that pretends to offer choice only to railroad you so hard you end up coughing up railway spikes. One final thing to mention about conversations are skill checks. In older Fallouts, many skills and even special stats could be checked in conversation. In Fallout 4, since skills are dead, charisma checks are the only ones that still exist. Yes, I know about the intelligence checks in the USS Constitution quest. They are an anomaly I can't explain, like a dev accidentally left in some tiny speck of actual RPG design. Charisma checks mostly fall into two categories: ask for more money or convince someone not to fight you. Rarely does a charisma check reveal useful information or present a different way to progress or end a quest. I know this because I spent most of my run with a grand total of 4 charisma. I failed more checks than I passed, and it didn't matter. Ever. Failing persuasion didn't close off routes, it didn't shift storylines, it didn't change outcomes. The game just shrugs and keeps going, hoping you don't notice how little it mattered. An example. During the pinned quest for the Institute, you've got Minutemen outside a house, and you need to get them to stand down if you're siding with the Institute. Your options are talk them down or kill them. I fail the first persuasion attempt, but instead of facing consequences, the game gives me another 4 rolls at it. One of them is easier, I pass, and they leave. Okay, so failing just means try again until you don't. But it gets worse inside. There's a scientist holed up in a room who the Institute wants. He's locked himself in, so you try to talk him out. I've got the charm of a peevish librarian, so I fail both skill checks. How does the quest resolve? Do I have to improvise? Do I fail the objective? No. The Institute handler just shrugs, teleports a synth into the room, the synth knocks him out cold, done. The quest continues as if nothing happened. So tell me, what was the point of those checks? Why even dangle them in front of me if failure means absolutely nothing? Why not just have the guy beam in the synth from the start? The checks don't matter, the outcome doesn't change, and once more, the player's agency is an illusion. Fallout 4's conversation system is vestigial, an appendix the game forgot to remove. Something that was once a key part of the series is now a shriveled husk that barely serves a purpose. The choices it gives you are meaningless, empty, and without consequence. Honestly, they could have cut the whole system and just made conversations fully scripted cutscenes. That's how little your input matters. Not once did I ever walk away from a conversation in Fallout 4 feeling like I had gotten answers, or like I had any control over the direction of the conversation. The game doesn't let you probe deeper, even with the most important NPCs. Quests don't meaningfully change based on what you pick. More often than not, they either collapse into yet another shootout, or bypass consequences entirely when persuasion fails. And sometimes the game just flat out ignores your choices and does what it wants anyway. I feel like a broken record, but what is the point of a system when nothing in it matters? In Fallout 4, character building is pointless, combat is a tedious slog, conversations are useless. So what about quests? Quests are where every gameplay system in Fallout comes together. Whether you're fighting enemies, talking with NPCs, or making use of skill checks, odds are you're doing them in the context of a quest. Through them, you learn more about the story, meet new characters, gain XP and gear, and explore more of the game world. Quests in the previous games is where player agency truly shined. Quests, big and small, often had many outcomes that players could work toward, and even when a quest only had a single resolution, there were usually several different paths to get there: combat, diplomacy, stealth, or clever use of skills, allowing players to solve problems in ways that reflected the character they had built. The main issue with quests in Fallout 4 is the lack of player choice and consequences. The quests rarely give the player any agency on how to complete them, with most of them being resolved in a single way. And as for consequences, there are none, as many quests do not change based on the player's actions, and any failure on the part of the player goes unpunished or unaccounted for. Again, it's like the devs took illusion of choice as a philosophy for how quests were designed. Many quests will present the player with what appears to be a choice: support character A or character B. But neither of the choices matter, as the end result is the same. You get the same reward and the same outcome narratively. In the vast majority of quests with choices, the choice is either to kill someone or not, or to choose to kill one person or another, and rarely does it matter. Any sort of after effects based on your actions are not even considered or cared about. Before I break down the lack of choice and consequences, I'm going to do a little walkthrough of one of the quests that I feel encapsulates this game's quest design failure. And then I'm going to compare it to a better quest from a better Fallout game. Out of the Fire is a Minuteman side quest that sends you to Finch Farm, a small settlement near the coast. Abraham Finch runs out and tells you about the Forged, a raider gang holed up in the Saugus Ironworks. His son Jake recently joined them, and to make it worse, he took off with the family's heirloom sword. Abraham wants you to get the sword back. He doesn't care what happens to Jake. Alright, so off I go to the Ironworks, which, by the way, is a 20-second jog from Finch Farm. This game has a major issue with so many locations being practically next to each other. So, what are your options for dealing with the Forged? Surely, this is a perfect setup for multiple approaches. Maybe I bluff them, saying I'm a traitor or I have some tribute for them. Maybe I could get a raider outfit and try to sneak in. Maybe with a high skill check, lol, skill checks, I can persuade or intimidate them to speak with their leader. Nope. None of those things. Your only option is to kill them all. They're all shoot on sight, just another flavor of raider dungeon you've seen a dozen times already, except these guys like fire a bit more. Why bother with role-playing options when you can just dump the player into yet another tedious combat slog? Once you make your way to the blast furnace, you find Jake and the leader of the Forged, Slag. Slag wants Jake to prove himself by killing a prisoner. At this point, you might make the mistake and think the game will finally throw in some nuance. Can you convince Slag to let Jake walk? Trade the sword back? Kill the prisoner yourself and earn his respect? Hell, maybe even join the Forged and take a darker path? Nope. You can only talk to Jake, convince him not to kill, or goad him into doing it. And if you try to kill the prisoner yourself, thinking maybe that's some way to play along, the entire room becomes hostile anyway. Either way, the outcome is a firefight. After gunning down Slag, the Forged, and maybe even Jake, you take the sword from Slag's body and head back down to Finch Farm. If Jake survived, Abraham makes up with his son, gives you some caps, and lets you keep the sword. If Jake dies, Abraham gives you slightly less caps and lets you keep the sword. Oh, and in both cases the farm becomes a settlement. Yay. So what's the difference with these endings? There isn't one. How did my choice affect the ending? It didn't. No matter how it plays out, you get rewarded. Abraham doesn't care if his son is dead, he doesn't even want the sword back, and he doesn't care at all about the events that took place. A potentially interesting moral conflict, the idea that Abraham might secretly want his son back, but hides it behind the excuse of getting the sword back, goes completely unexplored. Instead, it's just another quest where every possible branch leads to the same reward. There is no way to deal with the Forged outside of combat. There is no way to deal with Slag other than violence. Regardless of what happens in the end, I am rewarded. Player choice didn't even matter at all in this quest. The supposed choice at the end is just another entry in Fallout 4's ever-growing landfill of fake decisions. The hollowness doesn't stop there. This quest is never referenced again. None of these characters matter. Abraham, Jake, they're disposable assets, tossed aside the moment you leave Finch Farm. They never call you, never show up later, never change the landscape of the Commonwealth in any way. Jake could be alive, or Jake could be smeared across the floor of the blast furnace and the world would respond with the exact same shrug. As for the Forged, forget it. You never hear about what happens to them after you kill their leader. Do they collapse without Slag, scattering into the wasteland? Do they regroup under some other pyromaniac with a flamethrower fetish? Does anyone in the Commonwealth even notice that a supposed major raider faction just got annihilated? The game doesn't give a shit, so why should the player? This entire quest, like so many others in Fallout 4, is filler. It exists to pad out the gameplay, to toss another batch of raiders in your path so you can chew through the same combat loop you've done already 100 times. The designers didn't care about how this quest would fit into the world, didn't care about having multiple ways of finishing it, didn't care about the consequences it might have, didn't care about whether it said anything meaningful about the Commonwealth or its factions. It's just another shooting gallery with a thin layer of dialogue smeared over top. That's all it ever was meant to be. Now let's compare all that empty noise to a quest from an older Fallout game. Fallout 1 to be exact. In Shady Sands, you start off helping the town with their rad scorpion problem. Come back a little later and things escalate. Tandi, the daughter of the town's leader Aradesh, has been kidnapped by a group of raiders, the Khans. Aradesh is desperate and you're asked to rescue her. When you track down the Khans, you could go in guns blazing and try to wipe out the whole camp. It's tough to pull off early on, but it's an option, and you can always return later with a couple more levels and some better gear to even the odds. But here's the difference from Fallout 4. That's not your only way forward. Fallout 1 actually gives you options. Fallout used to understand this radical concept called player agency. You can intimidate Garl, the Khan leader, and scare him into releasing Tandi. You can negotiate and buy her freedom if your character has the caps. But wait, there's more! You can challenge Garl to a one-on-one unarmed fight, winner takes all. Or, if you'd rather be sneaky, you can quietly kill the guards and pick the lock on her cell. Multiple paths, different playstyles, This simple quest allows for more player agency than any quest in Fallout 4. Get her back home and you're rewarded with some XP and caps, but it doesn't stop with the immediate outcome. Fallout 1 actually tracks what you did and shows you the consequences. Save Tandi, and she helps her father grow Shady Sands into the new California Republic, a functioning post-nuclear state. Fail to save her, and the town struggles on, smaller and weaker, with Aradesh eventually dying before he can build something greater. The world remembers what you did, and it changes because of you. The game gives player consequences outside of handing them more or less caps for a quest. It shows how the player's actions actually affect the world, making even a small side quest feel significant. Honestly, this one comparison already makes Fallout 4's approach to quests, choice, and consequence look hollow. But for the hell of it, let's dig a little deeper. Just how little does player choice matter in Fallout 4's quests? And how few consequences do you actually face? Choice and consequences. Action and reaction. Player do thing, world reacts to thing. This is pretty basic, foundational stuff for an RPG, and something that the older Fallout games did in spades, but is nearly absent in Fallout 4. I'm not going to cover every quest in the game. Instead, I'll focus on some that I think are indicative of how Fallout 4 treats player agency. I'll cover some side quests and some main faction quests, and examine how they give no agency to the player and how they are allergic to consequences. Many of Fallout 4's quests are T-Junctions. You follow the quest's main path, and at the end you're handed a choice, option A or option B. Usually it means siding with one person over another, and often killing the one you didn't pick. But this choice isn't earned. It's not the result of your actions throughout the quest, because the game never gives you any actions to take. You just walk the path until you reach the fork, then pick whichever NPC you like more. The already mentioned Out of the Fire is an example of this type of quest, but let's cover another. The Big Dig can be found while wandering Good Neighbor. You stumble across an alley where a ghoul named Bobby No-Nose offers you a job. Help dig a tunnel for her. After a few Mirelurks scare off her other workers, she sends you to meet her in Diamond City. Once there, she explains the plan. She wants to tunnel into the Diamond City storeroom and rob it. To pull this off, you'll need a guy named Mel, who just so happens to have a robot that can help dig. The problem is, Mel is in jail. Bobby tells you to break him out. This is where the quest actually seems to give the player some options. You can bribe the guard or pass a charisma check. You can hack a Protectron to start a fight with the guards, or you can sneakily steal a key and unlock the cell. At first, it looks like this is genuine player agency. But here's the catch. None of this matters. Mel is only in jail for a single day. That's right. If you just wait 24 in-game hours, he'll walk out on his own and you can recruit him. Every one of those choices is rendered completely pointless. Why risk turning the entire city hostile when you can just stand around for 30 seconds of real time and skip the whole thing? The devs were so terrified of players getting stuck or failing a quest that they stripped away the possibility of consequence entirely. You can't mess up. You can't lock yourself out of progress. And because of that, choices lose all meaning. Okay, so after sitting on my ass and waiting, I recruit Mel and head back to the dig. Mel whips out his magic digging robot, and surprise, the next leg of the quest is just another dungeon crawl. You slog through Mirelurks and ghouls until you finally break into the storeroom. Once inside, you're confronted by a woman named Fahrenheit. She tells you that this isn't Diamond City's storeroom at all. It actually belongs to Hancock, the mayor of Good Neighbor. Fahrenheit warns you to back off. Bobby, of course, insists you ignore her and take everything anyway. And here's the supposed choice. Help Bobby or kill Bobby. If you betray her, Fahrenheit rewards you with a unique minigun, praises your decision, and promises Hancock will be happy with your loyalty. Quest over. If you side with Bobby, you kill Fahrenheit, you still get the same minigun, plus some caps, and then immediately get a short follow-up quest that wipes away the consequences of your actions. Now let's think about this. Fahrenheit is Hancock's personal bodyguard, maybe even a close friend. So if you kill her and rob him blind, that should obviously make you hated in Good Neighbor, right? Fahrenheit makes it clear that they knew you were coming from all the noise, and if she didn't return, Hancock would figure out what happened. Well, if you stroll back into Good Neighbor, Hancock is just standing at the gate, waiting for you. Remember the first time you meet Hancock? A thug tries to shake you down for caps on your first visit to Good Neighbor. Hancock calls him off, and the guy accuses Hancock of going soft. Hancock responds by pulling a knife and stabbing him to death on the spot. That's his characterization. Ruthless, and not afraid to get his hands dirty. So how does he react when you rob him and murder his bodyguard? Instead of disemboweling you on the spot, he tells you to deal with Bobby and give him 1,000 caps. Feels like I'm getting off a bit easy, but okay. You can even charisma check him down to a lower amount, which is kind of funny. The game even gives you an option to say no to him, as if Hancock is asking you for a favor, but of course that choice is ignored and the quest goes right into your log anyway. Even worse, nothing happens if you refuse to finish this quest. You can leave it sitting in your log forever, wander good neighbor as if nothing happened, and Hancock never sends anyone after you. No bounty, no hostility, no consequences. But let's say you do the deed and finish off Bobby and return to Hancock. He just laughs. He doesn't even collect the caps. And then he offers to be your companion? What? You just robbed him, killed his bodyguard, and his reaction is basically, whatever, let's hang out. This is the same man who stabbed someone to death for suggesting he'd gone soft. All of this just so that the player can avoid the logical consequences of siding with Bobby during her quest. In a better Fallout game, siding with her would have real consequences. You'd be barred from recruiting Hancock, maybe even locked out of Good Neighbor until you paid him off. Imagine if New Vegas worked this way. You blow up the Brotherhood bunker, but Veronica still happily joins you as long as you grab her address. Or you're allied with the Legion, but Boone's cool with it if you take him out for some fucking ice cream or something. What's the point of siding with Bobby if the reward is basically the same and the consequences don't exist? Every other T-Junction quest in Fallout 4 plays out the same way. You follow the single path laid out for you, and at the very end you're handed a decision. Maybe you get a slightly different reward, maybe not, but that's it. Last voyage of the USS Constitution? Side with the robots or the scavengers? The Secret of Cabot House? Side with Lorenzo or Jack? Human error? Kill Dan or save Amelia? None of your actions during the quest actually matter. They don't affect the outcome in any way. You're just presented with 2 buttons at the end and told to pick whichever one you like better. The T-Junction is bad, but Fallout 4 can sink even lower. A lot of its quests are just straight lines. No choices, no alternate endings, just a checklist of objectives that all lead to the exact same outcome. Take Confidence Man. You walk into the Dugout Inn in Diamond City and overhear the bartender Vadim complaining about the local radio station DJ, Travis. Travis sounds nervous and awkward on the air, and Vadim jokes that someone should get rid of him. That could have been a neat option, kill him or replace him with a competent DJ, but of course the game doesn't let you do that. Instead, Vadim decides that Travis needs to build confidence. His plan is to stage a bar fight with hired thugs so Travis can win and feel better about himself. The player's part is to help him out and make it look real. So I wait until Travis and the thugs show up. They start heckling him, and here's a funny detail, they'll keep taunting him forever until you step in.
I'm only here for a drink.
I don't like you, and I don't like your radio. What you gonna do about it?
What's this about?
Wanting to test how much the game will let me push it, I pull out a minigun and slaughter both thugs right there in the middle of the bar. Does this fail the quest? No. Do the other NPCs turn hostile? No. Does it meaningfully affect anything? Barely. Vadim just chews me out afterward, saying my double kill set back the attempt to boost Travis's confidence, yet the quest rolls forward exactly the same. Next, Vadim sends me to talk to Scarlet, a waitress Travis has a crush on. Okay, so my double homicide didn't matter. Cool. So I go talk to Scarlet. Bringing up Travis has Scarlet mention that she heard about the bar fight and thought Travis was really brave. Except there was no fight. Travis just stood there while I turned 2 hecklers into red paste. The game doesn't acknowledge it. The devs didn't even bother to write alternative dialogue. Okay, whatever. I tell Scarlet to give Travis a chance. She's unsure, and the game gives me the option of 3 charisma checks. One of them is Threaten, where my character literally states that she can either visit Travis or visit a doctor. Scarlet is rightly outraged. Does she end the conversation with this person that just threatened violence against her? Do I fail the quest? Am I forced to find another way to convince her or find someone else? No. I just pick a different option, and she immediately agrees to see Travis. What a nice girl. A little dumb, but nice. Back at the Dugout Inn, Vadim is missing. his brother Yefim informs me that the friends of the guys I killed came and took Vadim away when he refused to pay them. You might be thinking that this is actually the result of me choosing to kill those thugs, and you'd be wrong. Vadim gets kidnapped no matter what. The quest didn't care what you did. No real choice, no real consequence. So off we go to save him. Travis, for some reason, knows Vadim is being held at the Beantown Brewery and insists on coming along. At this point, you might imagine some interesting possibilities. Could we negotiate for Vadim's release? Sneak in and free him without bloodshed? Maybe Travis steps up and, depending on the choices we've made so far, talks or intimidates the kidnappers into letting Vadim go. Maybe we even fail to save him and Travis has to live with the consequences. In an actual Fallout game, maybe the choices we've made in the quest and conversations with Travis would influence the outcome. But this is Fallout 4. The brewery is just another raider dungeon. You shoot your way through, free Vadim, get some caps, and it's over. Travis is suddenly brimming with confidence, all because he watched me massacre some thugs and then got laid. That's the whole quest. A straight line, with no options for you to alter its course. What a waste. As for companion quests, I only bothered with one in Fallout 4, but it fits the mold of the straight line quest. Nick Valentine is the only companion who isn't a total plank of wood, which is enough to make him stand out in this game. His quest, Long Time Coming, could have been a fascinating look into his character. It could have explored how he struggles with his identity, with memories and a personality that aren't really his own. But since this is Fallout 4, I already knew that wasn't going to happen. Instead, the quest is another fetch quest. You're told to collect 9 holotapes scattered across the Commonwealth. They belong to Eddie Winter, a pre-war crime boss who somehow managed to turn himself into a ghoul so he could live forever. Nick thinks that Winter is still alive and wants to settle the score, which is a little insane, but fine. At least Nick's a detective, so maybe this quest will lean into that. Maybe you'll have to follow clues, deduce the location of the tapes, and actually work through it like a mystery. No. They're marked on your map. You walk to the marker and you pick up the tape. Okay, fine. And surely, at the very least, Nick would comment as you find each tape, give context about his history with Winter or the old Nick or something to build the tension. Again, no. Nothing. You grab the tapes in silence, dump them into Nick's hands, and he congratulates you on your good detective work, which is hilarious considering I literally just followed quest markers. Okay, whatever. I now have the code to Winter's bunker. After fighting through what feels like the 1000th raider dungeon, I finally confront Winter. He's been holed up here for over 200 years. Now here's the moment where you might expect to make a choice. Can you talk Nick down from his revenge? Convince him he's his own person, not bound by the grudges of a man whose memories were just implanted in him? Of course not. Nick declares he's going to kill Winter. Winter barely reacts because he doesn't even recognize Nick as Nick, and then he just shoots him. That's it. Because Fallout 4 loves convenience, the bunker's exit just so happens to lead you directly to the place where Nick's fiancée was murdered 200 years ago. Does this trigger a real emotional moment? Some kind of reckoning? Not really. Nick shrugs, mutters a line about how that's where it happened, and the quest just ends. Later, he thanks you and says it was all about justice, and that's the only thing he has that's truly his. Which sounds nice in theory, but what did I actually do for him? I fetched some tapes. I killed a guy who didn't even care about him. I didn't really help Nick resolve his identity, his grief, or his past. The game just waves its hand and insists it was about justice, when in reality, nothing really happened, and I as the player had no influence on the outcome. Do I even need to compare this to the companion quests in New Vegas? I probably don't, but let's do it anyway. For Auld Lang Syne is Arcade Ganon's companion quest. Once you've earned his trust, Arcade opens up about his past, growing up in Navarro, his father serving as an Enclave officer, and how the Enclave still casts a shadow over him. He believes that some of the former members of the Enclave could be used to help tip the scales at the upcoming second battle of the Hoover Dam, and so the quest begins. From here, the quest is kind of similar to Long Time Coming. The locations of the 5 former Enclave members are marked on the map, but where it differs is in how it gives players choice to affect Arcade as a person. Every time you recruit one of them, Arcade has something to say. He shares memories, gives context, explains who these people were to him and what they represent, and each time you get the chance to respond, to push him towards embracing his father's legacy or to encourage him to forge his own path. Once the whole group is recruited, you can choose which side they support at the Hoover Dam. If you side with the Legion, Arcade is furious and leaves for good. If you side with the NCR, you actually have to convince Orion Moreno, who despises the NCR, to give up his grudge and join the fight. After all that, Arcade himself asks where he belongs. Should he suit up in his father's armor and fight, or should he walk away and continue his work with the followers of the Apocalypse? If your answer doesn't match the way you've been guiding him so far, you'll need to pass a skill check to convince him. Arcade has 8 different ending slides that reflect the choices you made with him, who the Enclave remnants fought for, and how he chose to live his life afterward. His quest is about legacy and identity, about being beholden to the past or carving out a new future. Compare that to Long Time Coming. It barely acknowledges Nick's inner conflict. I hardly talk to him, hardly get context, hardly do anything but collect tapes and shoot a guy who doesn't even recognize him. The quest pretends it's about justice, but I don't help Nick find peace or reconcile his past or resolve who he is. For Auld Lang Syne and Long Time Coming are circling the same themes. However, New Vegas gives me the agency to actually engage with Arcade's struggle and shape his outcome. Fallout 4 reduces Nick's arc to a fetch quest and a shrug. Well, those are just side quests. The main quests have to be better, right? Packed with choices and branching paths, right? Right? No. The faction questlines do the exact same thing. The game pretends to hand you options, but they're just lies. There's only one way to complete each quest, and if you don't play along, pick another faction. By this point, it's exhausting. You either do exactly what the devs want you to do, or the story shuts down. There's no way to alter or influence the course of each faction's questline. You can't reform the Institute's view on synths. You can't push the Brotherhood to capture the Institute instead of destroying it. You can't convince any of the factions to work together. Every single questline ends the same way. You annihilate the other factions. No diplomacy, no negotiation, no alternative victories, just total destruction. The Minutemen are the one exception, and that's because they're the backup faction in case you screw up the others. The Minutemen are so unimportant that nobody gives enough of a shit about them to consider destroying them. The Minutemen are like 10 guys in matching hats. There are like 3 or 4 named NPCs for the entire faction. They're a joke. Here's some examples of how on rails the faction quests can be. In the railroad quest Tradecraft, you are tasked with recovering some prototype technology left behind at the old railroad HQ that was overrun by the Institute. You meet up with a scout who's been watching the entrance, and right away, you're thrown into another pointless conversational cul-de-sac. No matter what you say, it's one way in, one way out. You can even completely ignore what Deacon told you to say, skip the countersign, and the game doesn't care. The scout doesn't blink. Deacon just covers for you, and the story moves forward like nothing happened. This is supposed to be a super secret underground resistance movement, but they seem fine with their newest agent breaking protocol. Consequences? What are those? You're told that the front entrance of the base is guarded by synths and a minefield. Deacon suggests going through the back door. I decide no, let's go in through the front. For a moment, I thought that I was actually being given a choice. Deacon even says that this is my rodeo, so if I want to charge in, go for it. An optional objective to enter through the front entrance even pops up. Okay, cool. Finally, this will be the quest that acknowledges my decision. So I blast my way through the synths to the hidden elevator entrance in the diner basement. And the elevator has no power, so the game forces me to take the back door. Why do this? Why give me the illusion of choice just to rip it away seconds later? What is the point of dangling that option in front of me if it wasn't real? Was it so vital that I trudged through yet another combat dungeon? Was it really so difficult to make another way to progress through this quest? The devs couldn't be bothered, so I guess the answer is yeah, it was. You go through the back because that's the way they wanted you to go. And that's the pattern over and over. In the quest Powering Up for the Institute, Father has you record a speech to play across the Commonwealth announcing their intentions. You can take the speech in a few different directions. Dismissive of the surface dwellers, hopeful about improving their lives, or straight up menacing, promising rule with an iron fist. And none of it matters. The speech is never mentioned again, inside or outside the Institute. Sure, you can hear it play, but no one reacts. No one cares. Then, after activating the Institute's fusion reactor, Father sends you to sit in on a directorate meeting in his place. This could be interesting. You're about to take his place as the director, so maybe this is where the game lets you actually steer the Institute. Maybe you get a chance to decide how this shadowy organization operates. You sit down, and the topic is how to handle the Brotherhood of Steel. Okay, this could be good. You're given dialogue choices like avoid conflict, wait and see, minimize the violence, and hit them hard. Each of these could have been a questline branch, changing the way the Institute deals with the Brotherhood. You might try diplomacy, or maybe something more underhanded, like replacing Elder Maxon with a synth and undermining the Brotherhood from within. That's the kind of scheming the Institute should excel at. I chose wait and see, and Dr. Lee pretty much called me stupid, saying it would only give the Brotherhood more time to prepare. All the eggheads agree that the Brotherhood has to be destroyed. No debate, no real choice. The so-called smartest minds in the Commonwealth end up sounding like cavemen who only understand kill or be killed. And this is the same problem that every faction has. They all just want to murder their rivals, no matter what. There's not even some kind of director veto or quests to convince them over to your side. The game doesn't even give you an option to question it. It just moves on, stating that that's what they've decided, and now as the director, you have to choose how to achieve this goal. You of course have no real input on this. You're given the option to either boost synth production or improve weapons, and I'm 99% sure this choice changes absolutely nothing. The devs want you to destroy the Brotherhood, so that's what you're going to do. End of story. The faction quests fall into the same trap as the side quests, where the consequences just don't exist, which is unbelievable considering they are the main plot of the game. The Brotherhood of Steel quest, From Within, has you infiltrate the Institute to convince Dr. Madison Lee to return to the Brotherhood so she can help rebuild Liberty Prime. There's a charisma check that lets you skip the rest of the quest, but if you fail it, Lee wants evidence about Dr. Virgil. She thinks he was killed in an accident. This is the same Virgil who helped you infiltrate the Institute, and who now lives as a super mutant out in the glowing sea. You can try to tell Lee that Virgil is alive and that you know him personally, but she just laughs in your face and calls you a liar just to keep you on the rails. Why does the game keep missing obvious opportunities for choice? This could have been simple. You go back to Virgil, he gives you some detail that only he and Lee would know, you pass that along, and Lee realizes you're telling the truth. That would convince her that the Institute lied. Done. Easy. But no, Fallout 4 doesn't allow that. Instead, the game forces you to crawl through yet another dungeon. You go into a disused part of the Institute and shoot robots and turrets, because that's what Fallout 4 is, a mediocre FPS wearing a fake RPG mask. You find the thing she wants, and she heads to the Brotherhood. Now, Elder Maxon made it clear to you that this has to be done quietly, and you should not make the Institute hostile. Okay, got it. So what if I go into the Institute and lob a fat man at Father and then bail? Surprisingly, the quest doesn't fail. You just return to Maxon, he chews you out, and then the Brotherhood questline continues like nothing happened. Liberty Prime is still on the table. Nothing changes. Maxon insists Lee is essential to getting Prime online, but if you mess it up, the Brotherhood magically has a backup plan. And not a plan where they adapt or rethink their strategy, oh no. They just conveniently have another scientist who can do exactly what Lee does. Of course they do. The game just conjures her out of nowhere because God forbid the player's actions actually matter. You don't even have to look for her. Ingram just tells you who she is and where to find her in Diamond City. From Diamond City you're directed to a robot galleria or whatever. You find her there, and then you get 3 charisma checks to convince her to join you. I failed all of them. Did the quest end? Did I screw up the Brotherhood's plans for good? Of course not. Because Ingram handed me a shiny piece of tech to give to her, and like clockwork, she agrees to come along without a second thought. Why even give me dialogue checks if they don't matter? Why pretend I can fail when the quest will always protect me from consequences? The Brotherhood loses nothing. The questline never changes, and Liberty Prime stomps on schedule. The only real punishment is I have to keep playing Fallout 4. Okay. Before moving on, I really need to stop and talk about something that technically isn't related to my main point, but ended up being one of the most baffling moments of my playthrough. In the quest Liberty Reprimed, you have to convince Dr. Lee to work on Liberty Prime again. Asking her about it triggers a conversation that honestly left me stunned. I'll let the clip play here so you can hear it for yourself.
You promised you'd help us.
You're right, I did. But you neglected to mention that I'd be asked to work on Liberty Prime. I've been down this road with the Brotherhood before. Why would I make the same mistake twice?
Why won't you help us with Liberty Prime?
I originally left the Brotherhood because I was tired of being stepped on and used. First, there was the Water Purification Project, designed to freely benefit the entire Capital Wasteland. Even though the Brotherhood allowed it to be activated, they wanted to control it. But that wasn't enough. They forced me to help design Liberty Prime. turned my work into a weapon of war. I had enough, so I left. It's as simple as that.
Why would she make the same mistake twice? Does Dr. Lee consider fixing Liberty Prime a mistake? The Brotherhood used him to defeat the Enclave. You know, the faction that wanted to poison Project Purity with FEV and wipe out the entire wasteland. The same faction that murdered your coworkers, hijacked the project you spent years on, and killed your old friend/crush Liam Neeson. She says the Brotherhood wanted to control Project Purity, as if them doing that in and of itself was wrong. Does she not remember that they gave the water out freely, even having their knights and paladins protect the caravans delivering it across the capital wasteland? Then she starts hallucinating. She claims the Brotherhood forced her to help design Liberty Prime. Excuse me? Liberty Prime was a pre-war robot. He was already built before the bombs fell. She didn't design him, she just helped fix his power issues. But she talks like she personally created him, and the Brotherhood twisted her work into a weapon of war. What other work could it be? Her work at the Purifier? How would they turn that into a weapon of war? Also, she willingly went to the Brotherhood after the Enclave took Project Purity, and she helped them with Prime. Nobody dragged her kicking and screaming into the lab. What the hell is she even talking about? None of this makes any sense. There's so much wrong with this conversation that I can't even tell if this is supposed to be Dr. Lee's warped perspective, or if the devs are straight up retconning their own story, or if they just forgot what actually happened in Fallout 3. I get that Fallout 4 wants to paint the Brotherhood as more authoritarian, but why try to rewrite the events of Fallout 3 to make them look like villains retroactively? It's bizarre. Even as someone who doesn't think Fallout 3 is any good, I was stunned at how openly Fallout 4 seems willing to crap on its own continuity for no reason. Alright, back to consequences, or the lack of them I suppose. The quests in Fallout 4 don't give a shit about consequences, outcomes, aftermaths, whatever. How could it possibly get worse? Well, the endings are also shit. The good Fallout games actually used their endings to show how the player's actions shaped the world. Even if there was only one main ending, like in Fallout 1 with stopping the Master, or Fallout 2 with defeating the Enclave, there were still many ways the player could influence what happened in the world after the game ends. Characters and locations would change based on what they did or didn't do. People would live or die. Settlements would thrive or collapse into ghost towns. Which family would rule New Reno? What was the fate of the town of Novak? What future awaited Shady Sands? These were a direct result of the player's actions. Those games gave the player room to make choices and were willing to account for the repercussions, even if it was just through an ending slide. Fallout 4 doesn't give the player choice, it doesn't give the player consequences. And because of that, the game has only 2 endings, and both of them are nearly identical. Of the 4 factions in Fallout 4, 3 of them, the Brotherhood, the Railroad, and the Minutemen, all share the same ending cutscene. On paper, these factions are wildly different, and yet somehow the devs decided they deserved nearly identical outcomes. Their final quest, the nuclear option, plays out nearly the same no matter which one you side with, the only difference being which set of NPCs is tagging along with you. You plant charges on the Institute reactor, it blows up, and then you get an ending cutscene. And what is the cutscene? The sole survivor gives a vague monologue about how the world is different now, and how they wish they could turn back time, and of course we get the obligatory "war never changes" line, because you have to include that line, right? It's a Fallout game, so someone has to say it, whether it fits or not. Say "war never changes" and the seals will clap like morons. Oh, I guess it's a Fallout game now. And then there's the Institute's unique ending. After killing off the other factions, you finish their last quest, Nuclear Family. You talk to Father, he dies of his mystery cancer, and then the ending cutscene plays. And outside of a short 6-word sentence acknowledging Father's death, the cutscene is exactly the same as the other ones. The endings don't even bother to talk about the state of the Commonwealth after everything is said and done. They don't touch on what the victorious faction will actually do now that they're in charge. What happens now that the Brotherhood has finished their crusade? What does the Railroad become now that there are no more synths to liberate? How does an unopposed institute shape the future? How do the resurgent Minutemen protect the Commonwealth? Who cares? It says nothing about the various settlements or minor factions you interacted with. What becomes of Diamond City, Good Neighbor, Bunker Hill, or even all the settlements the player built from the ground up? Doesn't matter. The game's many companions are not mentioned at all. You'll never learn how your actions affected them, or how they'll live now that the dust is settled. How does Curie or Nick grapple with their identities in a Commonwealth ruled by the Brotherhood? What does Garvey do if the Minutemen never get rebuilt? No answers, no epilogues, nothing. The same is true for the side quests. None of their outcomes are acknowledged. The Forged are gone. Does that change anything in the Commonwealth? Covenant's secrets are revealed. Does the town recover? Travis grows a backbone. What does that do for his life? Whatever, moving on. And the reason you don't get any of these answers is simple. Because if the game did acknowledge them, it would expose just how shallow player agency really was the whole time. You didn't change anything. You were never allowed to. You just picked what ride to hop on at the Fallout 4 amusement park, and the developers locked down the rails so you couldn't stray from the path they built. I'm gonna twist the knife now. I want to show just how empty and pointless Fallout 4 feels when you put it next to the older games. To do that, I'm not even going to reach for one of the big famous quests. I'm not going to talk about something central to the main story. Instead, I'm going to pick a tiny little side quest from New Vegas that absolutely demolishes Fallout 4's entire approach to player agency. A quest where you don't even need to fire a single shot, and yet it gives you more options, more role-playing, and more impact than any of Fallout 4's main faction quests. It's a little quest called Flags of Our Foul-Ups. This quest can be found at Camp Gulf. An NCR sergeant explains that a squad of troopers, known as the Misfits, are in desperate need of shaping up if they want to be anything more than cannon fodder. From there, each of the Misfits will present you with a different way to handle the situation. One path lets you pass speech checks to build their teamwork and actually forge them into a unit. Another has you take them to the range, where your skills with guns and explosives determine whether you can train them properly. Less noble routes are also on the table. You can hack a terminal to falsify their scores and cheat them through evaluation, or if you're feeling particularly cruel, you can swing by the cons at Red Rock Canyon and score them some psycho. This little quest even has its own end slides to show the effects of your choices. If you shape them into real soldiers, they distinguish themselves when the Legion attacks Camp Gulf and serve with honor for years. If you do nothing, or if you falsify their scores, they collapse in the face of the Legion's assault and the survivors end up court-martialed and hanged. If you give them psycho, they hold the line during the battle, but their addiction spirals out of control. They start preying on travelers, which ends with them being dragged before a firing squad. This whole thing probably takes most players 5 to 10 minutes. But in that short span, New Vegas gives you more meaningful choices, more consequences, and more ways to roleplay than any quest in Fallout 4. No dungeons to slog through, no forced combat, no fake choices that don't change a thing, just a small, neatly designed scenario where your character's stats matter, your faction loyalties matter, and your roleplay matters. And again, I want to make it clear that this isn't even a standout quest in New Vegas. It's not a showcase. But Flags of Our Foul-Ups is what I'd consider the baseline. This is what the floor should look like in a Fallout game. Does every quest need to have half a dozen ways to complete it? No. Does every quest need to have strong consequences or an end slide? No. But I expect at least some of them to have it, as opposed to Fallout 4's total lack of them in any quest. And when you combine that with how many mechanics were stripped out of Fallout 4, it becomes obvious why you don't get real choices. Even if the devs wanted to give you branching outcomes, there's no system left to support them. Character builds barely matter. Special has been watered down. Perks are nothing more than flat stat boosts. Skills and skill checks are dead and buried. Combat is the only thing the game still knows how to do, so every quest needs a dungeon. Every quest ends in a shootout, and every problem is solved with violence because violence is the only tool left in the box. And even that has been streamlined and simplified to the point where it feels like a chore. What is the point? Why am I playing this? The box says Fallout, the devs insist it's Fallout, but it isn't Fallout. Every quest, every dialogue option, every supposed choice is just smoke and mirrors. The devs dangle options in front of you, but behind the curtain there's only one track, one outcome, one story you're allowed to follow. The illusion of freedom collapses the moment you tug on it, and when you see how thin it really is, the whole game feels hollow. Fallout games used to be about agency. It used to mean choices with weight, decisions that change the world around you, for better or worse. Fallout 4 doesn't give you that. It doesn't even try. After going through Fallout 4 system by system, what am I left with? A game devoid of player agency. A game that takes the illusion of choice and makes it a motto. A game that straps you into the roller coaster that the developers built and insists you enjoy the ride, no matter how little you influence it. Fallout 4 calls itself a Fallout game, but I can't believe it. This game barely resembles the games that came before it. Nothing I do in this game matters. All the choice is illusory, a front. That's what Fallout 4 is, a facade, a stage set. From a distance, it looks like Fallout. The familiar props and backdrops are all there, but peek behind the curtain, and there's nothing. No depth, no substance. I often hear the argument that Fallout 4 is a bad Fallout game, but an okay game overall. No, that is not true. Fallout 4 is mediocre at best. If you stripped away all of the Fallout iconography, vaults, the Brotherhood of Steel, super mutants, and called the game Wasteland Wanderer Nuclear Boston, everyone would see it for what it is, a 4 or 5 out of 10. A tedious, uninspired FPS with the faintest coat of RPG paint smeared over it. Bethesda didn't create Fallout's world. They're leaning on the work of more talented developers from decades ago. Because when they try to add their own ideas, we get factions like the Institute and the Railroad, brain-dead, contradictory messes, and a clumsy slavery allegory in the form of synths. And when you ask these same people to build something entirely from scratch, you get shit like Starfield. With how bad Fallout 4 is, I can't imagine how bad Fallout 5 will be. What else can they strip away? Will dialogue disappear completely? Will there only be a single questline? Will the last vestiges of RPG mechanics be cut, leaving nothing but a generic shooter? I don't know what it will look like, but I bet money they'll find a way to remove more of what made Fallout special. And as long as the series remains in the hands of people who created something as miserable as Fallout 4, I have no expectations of anything good coming out of a new Fallout. So, we come back to the question I've been asking throughout this video. What is the point? And the answer is, there isn't one. Well, that went on longer than expected. If you've made it this far, thank you, and if you enjoyed my rambling, liking the video and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. Most of my content is streaming games here and on Twitch, if you want to check those out. This is my first try at doing a scripted video, and I hope it came out as something coherent. I've had this idea bouncing around in my head for years, and I finally decided it was time to put it together. I even have an idea for another video, so maybe this will be a thing from now on. Just what YouTube needed, another video essayist. That's all I've got. Video's over. Thank you again for watching.